As the 2020 NHL playoffs move further along, today we're taking a look at some rumors focusing on the future of some key NHL goaltenders, including Braden Holtby of the Caps and Matt Murray of the Penguins. We have an update as well on the Arizona Coyotes investigation that's been taking place on their testing of junior age players. And could we see a major shift in the Florida Panthers and maybe a blow up and some significant trades this offseason now that they've been officially eliminated? We'll jump into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at some rumors and some things we might see this offseason, including some potential significant changes. Let's kick things off with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I want to take a look at an article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette examining the future of goaltender Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry. Of course, the Penguins find themselves in a bit of a hole here, down 2-1 against the Montreal Canadiens. Game 4 does go here shortly as I'm recording this video. It's almost ready to start. So by the time this makes it to YouTube, there could be either a 2-2 series or the Penguins might be eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll have to remain to be seen here. But regardless of the outcome of that series, we've known for a while that the Pens are going to have some tough decisions to make, and that the likelihood of them keeping Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry in the fold, both of them longer term, is extremely rare, almost impossible in fact. And now one of them is likely going to get signed to a new deal this offseason, and one should find themselves traded. Now, regardless of their cap situation, they also have to factor in the Seattle expansion draft coming up next year. I think either of these goalies would be a prime target if they were made available to the Seattle franchise. So for that reason, the Penguins are not going to want to go to a second consecutive expansion draft and lose a really solid goaltender. So I see one of them getting dealt ahead of time to make sure that doesn't happen. Like I said, plus they can't afford both anyhow. Of course, Matt Murray is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, has 2 Stanley Cups on his name. He was playing relatively well in the series against Montreal in the first few games, but the coach is going with Jarry in Game 4 today. So if Jarry plays really well and helps the Penguins come back, then that very well could change the whole dynamic of him. Of course, we saw the same thing with Murray a few years back when he took over from Fleury and went on a run and got a Stanley Cup. So, and I'm not going to predict that the Penguins are going to do the same thing in this scenario. However, Jarry has an opportunity here to really grab himself a big-time role with the Penguins, work on getting a new contract, and kind of making sure he's the guy that they decide to keep. So we'll see what happens. Of course, it's not all up to him. The team in front of him has to play better as well. But there's been a lot of rumors around Matt Murray for some time, and I firmly believe that even if Murray was the goaltender that played the most and took the Penguins on a deep run, as difficult it would be to move him, it's also going to be just as difficult to sign him. He's going to be looking for a lot of money on a longer-term commitment, and they might not be able to do that. So should be interesting to note here that there was a lot of teams interested, more so in Murray in the past, including some pretty interesting trade talks that apparently took place between the Penguins and the Colorado Avalanche, amongst a few other teams as well. So as this article goes on to indicate, I do think Matt Murray could have possibly even played his last game with the Penguins. If they get beat out, or if Jarry keeps winning and takes his team on a run, it could be the end of the line for Murray when it comes to his time with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So let me know if he is traded, where do you think is a good landing spot, and give me your mock trades down in the comments. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to look at the future of Caps goaltender Braden Holtby. Of course, as we know, is a pending unrestricted free agent, and many have felt for the most part that he very likely leaves the Capitals via free agency, that they're again not going to be able to afford to keep him due to the flat salary cap, and young goaltender Ilya Samsonov proving this year that he's capable of taking over the starting job. Now, of course, going into this return to play in the 2014 playoff format, we didn't know a lot until recently. We got more details again today that Samsonov was not able to take part in any of training camp. He was deemed unfit to play, not on a roster for this for the bubble team. He's not traveling with the team to Toronto. He remained in Washington, and obviously that's a big blow to them. He was expected to likely be the starting goaltender ahead of the playoffs getting underway, and Holtby could have, had a more of a backup role and was waiting for an opportunity, but clearly he's had to start so far and will have to as long as the Caps are still involved here in this playoff run. We get more information today on what happened to Samsonov. What are the details of the injury? We found out that apparently in Russia, before he returned to North America, further returned to play not too long before, that he had a four-wheeler accident. Samsonov obviously has posted videos on his social media before of him, driving ATVs, going four-wheeling and that kind of thing. But apparently he had an accident and had some pretty serious injuries to his neck and his back. Now, even though the team has reported that they fully expect him to be recovered and ready to go for next season, because of the seriousness of his injuries, there are some concerns over the long-term health complications that he's facing here, and that maybe he may not be able to be the same goaltender when he comes back, depending on what kind of, if there's any longer-term damage, or will he take longer maybe than expected to recover. So, of course, if Holtby leaves during free agency and Samsonov is not ready to go when the next season opens up, that could create quite a hole and really put the Capitals in a real situation where they're going to continue to be looking for answers and not know who to turn to. They don't really have a lot more depth in the organization for goaltending who's really able to step in, and it could cause some major issues for their performance overall as a team. So there's been some reports that maybe the Capitals will try to convince Braden Holtby to sign a short-term contract to remain in Washington, even if it's only 1 year, maybe 2 at most. But of course, if they do that, even if Holtby cuts them a deal, signs a 1-year deal of the same or less money that he's making now, that's still going to create a major salary cap issue. And if they don't lose Holtby, they're likely going to have to lose somebody else instead. So I'm not really sure that for a long-term outlook that it makes sense, but I understand that they want that insurance policy. Obviously, if Samsonov is still recovering, they might not really know the full extent of everything for a little while, which at the same time, the Caps are going to have some time before they really need to make a decision here. Clearly, by the time we get into free agency, which is likely going to be in October, they should have a much better idea about the extent of his injuries, how he's recovered, and how things are looking for the hopeful start of the 2020-2021 season, which training camp is expected to get underway in mid-November. If everything goes well, that's what they're targeting right now. So it could really change the dynamic here for the Capitals goaltending for the immediate future. There is some concern as well about the relationship between Samsonov and the team. There's reports that they weren't overly thrilled with his decisions and what activities he was doing prior to the return to play, because by the time this happened, things were far enough along with the return to play that, I guess they probably felt he should have been taking better care of himself, maybe not taking so much risk, because apparently he was driving really fast, and he's lucky that the injuries were not much more severe, that apparently they're saying that he could have even possibly died from the accident because of the how fast he was going and things like that. I don't know many more details than that, but obviously, a lot of times with accidents, regardless if it's a car accident or, a four-wheeler, ATV, or any other kind of vehicle, sometimes you do get lucky and they're not as bad off as it could have been, and it looks as though this is the case, but at the same time, he's still dealing with some serious recovery. So it'll be interesting to see how this impacts the goaltending situation of the Capitals longer term. So do you think maybe there would be a chance the Caps could sign Holtby to a short-term 1-year contract? I mean, really, what's the market going to be like? And there's a lot of teams going to have cap issues, and he might not be able to get a ton of money elsewhere. It's hard to say. But if he does, like I said, who else would be the player to go? And obviously, it's going to have to likely be, a complementary type of player, somebody who plays either their middle six, bottom six, maybe a defenseman. Hard to say, but they would have to make some moves, and many feel Holtby would be the guy to go, but maybe it won't be after all. Now, we have reports as well from TSN's Darren Dreger indicating that Gary Bettman might be ruling on the Arizona Coyotes investigation as early as this coming weekend. As we know, the NHL Draft Lottery Phase 2 is happening on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and I hope you'll join us here on the channel for a live stream to react and discuss what's going on with the team that gets the first overall selection. But because of the draft lottery coming up, there is word that he might want to get this ruling on the investigation out and completed here. Obviously, the Coyotes, their first round pick could be having some implications here. As we know right now, they were leading 2-1 against the Nashville Predators. They are playing Game 4 as I record this video, so it is possible that they could advance to the next round. Certainly, by no means right now we have reason to believe they'll be beat out, but if they did lose to Nashville in this series, then obviously they would be one of the teams in the draft lottery, and because this draft lottery Phase 2 is for first overall, it could really change the dynamic on who owns that pick. If there's going to be punishment, maybe it could be forfeiting a draft pick. That could really create more drama and havoc on this Phase 2 of the draft lottery. If the Coyotes beat the Preds, and right now they're leading the series, so if that happens and it stays put, then it won't be an issue because their first round pick then it will obviously be going to New Jersey for sure, but it won't be first overall because it won't be in that lottery. And I guess Bettman at that point could probably take more time if needed, but he probably wants to get something out of the way here sooner than later. Of course, we know GM John Chayka, who, in my opinion, would have been ultimately responsible for overseeing the testing of junior age players that was being investigated. And part of the problem here is no longer with the organization, and we get new ownership. So I don't really think Bettman is going to impose much on the financial side for implications or penalties. If they do penalize them, I would think surrendering a draft pick or something to that effect would be the likely road they would go down. But would they go as far as making them give up a first round selection? That would be some pretty significant damage done. I'll have to stay tuned if we get more information from the commissioner over the weekend. Now, as I mentioned as well, the Florida Panthers might be going through some significant changes, and maybe we could see some significant, a bit of a blow up, if you will, of the Panthers roster during this offseason. As within minutes of the Panthers being eliminated earlier today by the New York Islanders in the play-in series, there was already word from Andy Strickland of The Athletic, and others now are jumping in, corroborating the story, that it looks as though Dale Talon, the GM of the Panthers, is on his way out. And as I mentioned in a prior video that earlier today, I do feel that's a great decision. I don't think Talon's done a very good job. He's been there over a decade. A lot of bad signings, some questionable trades, poor drafting. The Panthers have not done very well. In the last decade, I think it's 7. I have to go back and check my numbers, but I believe it's 7 players actively on their roster that were drafted by the Panthers, which is really low. And some of those were really high picks, which I don't think you can get as much credit for because of the fact that, when you're drafting, anywhere from 1st or 3rd, 4th overall, it's harder to screw up, and obviously some of those players are just obviously good, and like I said, you don't always get as much credit when it's really not much involved in making that decision. But when you look at the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds and your ability to find players and become active players that play a long time for your team, that to me, that obviously that goes into being really good scouting and drafting in that regard. So they haven't done well, in my opinion, at least in drafting over the past decade. Obviously, that Bobrovsky signing is looking terrible right now. They even have a really expensive head coach who really, might be missing some of the tools he needs to really make this roster better. There's been talk about a salary cut coming for the Panthers, that they want to cut back on how much they're spending. You get guys like Hoffman and Dadonov are free agents. There's been talk for quite some time they very well could not be back. But maybe we could see a more significant trade amongst the core players like a Huberdeau or a Barkov or an Ekblad, something to that effect. There was some rumors earlier this year that we discussed, and I know many fans said, oh no, you're crazy, that's never going to happen. But you never know. Like right now with this ownership team in Florida and the lack of success, I mean, they've been a long time since they've made it past the first round of the playoffs. They don't really have very many playoff appearances to go with that either. And when they haven't made it out of the first round. Like, it's been a long time. So this team has underperformed. They made numerous changes year after year that we keep seeing that they've been, kind of retooled a bit, and they're going to be better. And they always fall short of expectations, and it's time for some significant change. They struggle with attendance. The team is just a bit of a mess, in my opinion. They have a lot of great pieces, but as a team, they're just not what it needs to be. And obviously, I think whoever comes in as a new GM, if Talon is let go, which it looks to be the case, is going to have to do something pretty significant to leave their mark. So I do think the odds have certainly increased drastically that we could see a significant piece traded out of Florida to really shake things up. I mean, I've seen Huberdeau's name mentioned before, Barkov's mentioned him before. Not that I really, you got to be careful with players like that because they're terrific special players. So it's hard to win those deals, but hard to say what they'll do. But we know that the Panthers in the past have been sometimes made some erratic decisions. I mean, so we'll see what they do here. Let me know your thoughts. Is it right that Dale Talon leaves town and gets some new leadership in Florida? And what moves would you make if you're early on the job trying to shake things up with that organization? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.